China's Big Bang exit from COVID-19 presents a number of opportunities across emerging markets. In a rapidly shifting environment, consumers, investors, and regulators across emerging markets are increasingly focusing on one word, and that word is sustainability. So what does this mean for EM companies? We're going to talk about that right now on UBS Trending. Hello, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. Happy to be here with you today and with my guest, Amantia Muhedini, Sustainable and Impact Investing Strategist with the CIO Americas team. Amantia, always nice to have you here in the studio talking about sustainable investing. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
So one of the things that I wanted to share with our audience before we start is that you release a monthly sustainable investing perspectives report every month where you always focus on three themes. So today we're going to focus on one of those three, which is talking about opportunities in emerging market ESG leaders. So let's take the jargon out, right?
Yep.
Start off, we know that ESG leaders are companies that are really moving forward and moving ahead of their other competitors in the ESG landscape.
That's right.
So let's talk about your preference now for emerging markets with ESG leaders.
Sure. So broadly in CIO, as my other colleagues will note, at the moment we're seeing opportunities in emerging markets, period, right? Because of China's reopening from COVID-19 and the removal of most restrictions, we think that there will be opportunities not just in China, but also in other emerging market countries, from Asia to Latin America to emerging market Europe. Now, that is the broader house view that we have. Beyond that, or I should say in addition to that, we think that those companies, to your point, Anthony, that are advancing on managing their operations, managing their people, managing their energy consumption, and showing investors what they're doing in these things, being transparent, we think those, what we call the ESG leaders, are also going to be an interesting opportunity right now.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because when we've been talking a lot about China reopening. It's a huge story, and it's got far-reaching impacts. But specifically with sustainable investing and ESG, why is that the case with China's reopening?
Sure. I mean, look, in some ways, the ESG, as we always say, should follow the broader investment trend, right? And so if this is an opening story and an investment story, then why do we see opportunities for ESG leaders? That's your question. If you think about broadly, as these economies are reopening, consumption is increasing, who are the beneficiaries? That's kind of one part of the story. A second part is what's happening here outside of COVID. In emerging markets, in China in particular, we're seeing since 2015 at least, but also more recently, an increase in focus on sustainability. Sustainability is important across all of these countries. They're all starting to catch up and really fastly accelerate their focus on this. So China in 2015 made it a big policy priority to drive green finance. Even more recently, last year, they made disclosures around sustainability mandatory for financial services. So what does that mean? To give you an example, if I'm a company that is a publicly listed company in China, I have my operations, I consume water, I manage my people, I use different energy sources to just run my business, right? From now on, I may have to start publicly showing to investors what that means. Like, what are my metrics? Am I managing them well or not?
And the government is mandating this, correct?
Yes. Or different entities within the government. It's not just a question of China. We're seeing this across other emerging market nations. Why does this matter to us as investors? Well, it's potentially an additional cost for companies who weren't thinking about it, say, yesterday, to do this thing, to then suddenly be mandated into it. And so what we're interested in are those companies that already, compared to their peers, were doing better. It means they'll have probably an easier time, and so they may present an opportunity for outperformance. And again, this is not just sort of a domestic China story. It's a broad story across these markets.
Right, and there are a number of other countries who now have these mandates or these green taxonomies that are starting. And I was talking about this with you earlier, and the question I brought up to you was how much of this, and we'll get into those other countries in a moment, it has to do with the Paris Agreement, because 193 states and the European Union are all a part of this in one way or the other. Some have more of a stake percentage-wise than others. But all of the countries that you're about to mention, plus China, are part of this. Is this some of the reasoning why these countries are putting their best foot forward when it comes to disclosing and being a part of green change?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly part of it. The Paris Agreement, the 2015 global agreement to drive down carbon emissions and go for net zero carbon emissions globally by 2050. So a year that feels far away, but with every year it's like coming closer.
It comes closer. That's right.
Comes closer, right? We're going to be a decade into this commitment. That's certainly driving some of the global consensus around this. That's why, I said it's no coincidence that some of the policy focus from China does start in 2015, but then it accelerates gradually. It continues to last year. And it's not just about carbon emissions. It's not just about political agreements, which what that ultimately is. It's this understanding that even from a regulatory perspective, it matters what the companies and the industries that you're developing are doing, how they're managing all of these risks and opportunities, both on the E and the S, and you want transparency so that investors and market participants can see that transparency.
And look, let's not mince words either. We know by doing lots of research over the last couple of years that investors really do want to support and invest in companies that do follow some mandate within the E, the S, or the G, environmental, social, or governance. So it's also in these countries and the companies' best interests to participate here.
Yeah, I mean, the why is the question, and the answer here is investment opportunities, differentiation among their peers, and transparency. We really like data as investors.
We certainly do.
We do. We want to know what companies do. And data and transparency is a first step, right? It doesn't tell you how well you're doing things. It doesn't tell you sort of if you're getting from A to B, but it tells you where you are on the spectrum from A to B. And so as these countries, and we're talking about China, but Brazil is sort of doing similar guidance around
Colombia and Mexico, India, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is a broad story. They're starting with transparency, with asking companies to give transparency. It's very likely that the next step then is maybe giving more guidance. Like now we have information, where should we be? What are these risks? So that's kind of the story that we're watching, and we think it presents opportunities.
I couldn't have come up with a better segue myself, Amantia, because I wanted to ask you, now that you've made this very strong case for emerging market, ESG, sustainable investing opportunities, where do you see the opportunities right now for investors who want to be in this particular space within the EMSI framework?
Sure. So what I'd say is think about these ESG leader companies who are basically companies that are relatively better than their peers within their market, within their country, within their specific sector, just the ones that are relatively differentiating. Think of that as a diversified strategy, which is what we would recommend. And now there's a broader question here, Anthony, which is, how will they do? Like, how do you know what this performance will look like? What has it looked like in the past? It's always the sustainable investing discussion that we have. And
I'm sure you get that question quite a lot from clients, from our advisors.
From you.
From
we
me.
have this conversation together all
Sitting
the
here
time.
in this room or in a conference room when we're prepping for these things?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Exactly. So when we look at the data at the index level of how an emerging market ESG leaders index has performed in the last 10 years of history, we noted that of 8 of the last 10 years, it outperformed the broad-based kind of EM index.
Right, and we have a chart for that. We can pull it up here in a second because I think it tells a really important picture of what you just described. 8 out of 10 years of outperformance, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so you can see how we're nearly always above that zero line, which indicates this relative outperformance compared to the parent benchmark. And what you'll notice here is that last year was sort of one of those years where ESG leaders had a more challenging year. But if you look at the longer history and if you look at this broader idea of consumers caring, of regulators caring, of the broader push towards sustainability, we're optimistic that this trend of comparable or outperformance will continue moving forward as well.
Terrific. Amantia, thank you. I know we could probably talk about this for another 10 or 20 minutes because it's always fascinating to me, but we've got to end it there. I do want to remind our viewers here, I talked about your report. There are 2 other themes within that report, which are sustainable investing, fixed income, as well as private markets. So 2 really interesting and important topics. Not to be left out, but we only have time for one on this particular show. But Amantia, thank you. I love having you here. We'll have you back. There's always something really interesting going on in the SI world, so thanks for being here.
Thank you. Always glad to join.
Good to see you. And for more information, everybody, make sure to visit our website at ubs.com/views. Tons of content up there from Amantia and the rest of the CIO, as well as our other partners at UBS. Plus, you can follow us on social media, on all the platforms, and check out all of the past UBS Trending episodes that we've done at ubs.com/studios and YouTube. And also, Amantia did a great conversation on the circular economy with our partners at Closed Loop on January 27th. So if you missed that, make sure to watch that episode as well. And always, if you have questions, talk to your financial advisor. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.